Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today I'm kind of winging this one, but we're just going to talk about how the first round really shakes out now for Jacksonville following their win over the Tennessee Titans. This is going to change things immensely, right? Because I remember just a couple days ago, right, we're recording videos talking about, what's Jacksonville going to be able to trade out of one for? Could they get Travis Hunter and even get a haul with it? What are they going to be able to do? Should they trade back up into the first round once they get a haul? And so we had all these really exciting ideas that unfortunately just kind of thrown out the window. And I'm not really, once again, not calling it unfortunate you win a game, right? It's a good thing to win. Like, I have no problem with the Tennessee Titans losing a game. The problem is obviously the impact of that, because now you're going from a position where you're sitting in first. You're planning to probably take a player who should be a generational type of talent. I genuinely believe that's what Travis Hunter will be. And now you're looking at it and saying, okay, what are we going to get now? There's a lot more uncertainty, and there's a little more fun to that in some ways. But yeah, you kind of wish you got the certain thing. So I have got mock draft pulled up for the first round. What we're going to do, because my original thought was, oh, we'll just run through this. We'll do a quick mock draft with the updated picks. It's not really realistic. The reason why, unfortunately, is the way that PFF is right now. Quarterbacks are not getting taken early in these, so it's just screwing up the draft picks. So, like, you'll have Travis Hunter go at 1. The Giants will take McMillan from Arizona. You'll get really crazy things, and it's not really realistic, right? And I could just end up having Travis Hunter fall in my lap when that's never going to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the first 4 picks to start and just talk about who I think would go off the board to these teams, because these teams have a pretty good shot picking above you. And then after that, we'll get to 5. We'll look at the options. We'll talk about who would be the best of the players that could be there, whether or not they went or were actually available. And then we might talk a little bit about where could you trade back? Is that an option? What kind of haul are you getting? We'll probably look at some potential trade packages. And just the goal of this ultimately is to really just reassess the draft situation, because the win over Tennessee changes it drastically. It's a whole different conversation now. So with that all said, let's go ahead and jump into this. So we've got what I think are 2 pretty easy picks at the top here. I don't see any trades. I don't see these teams considering it. The Raiders have made it very clear that they want to take Shedeur Sanders with their first round pick. Whether it's first overall or wherever, that's their guy. There's even been, there was a video where Deion Sanders was joking with Antonio Pierce in front of Shedeur and Shiloh about how he needs to take his sons. You've got Mark Davis, the owner of the Raiders, saying stuff to Shedeur about how, like, he should be calling it home in Las Vegas next year. Like, it's pretty clear they're showing their cards on who they want. And if that's not the case, well, kudos to them, man. They did a good job hiding it. But this is going to be Shedeur Sanders, I think, pretty easily. And when you get to the Giants pick, this is where it gets a little interesting. And where things maybe got a chance for, how do I say this? I think there's another quarterback that could enter the mix up here, especially considering the pre-draft process and everything. Maybe, Jacksonville could be a team that trades out at number 5. We'll talk about that a little bit. But there might be some debate on who could actually go here at number 2. I think there even could have been at 1 if it wasn't for the Raiders pretty clearly being locked into their guy. Now, for me, the conversation would be between 3 players here. It'd be Cam Ward, Jalen Milroe, and Drew Out. And at this point, just getting into the mind of what I think the Giants would do, which actually I feel like I can talk about a little bit now because I just watched the offseason Hard Knocks this week, which, tell you what, if you have not watched that, even though it's the Giants, it was such a good show. I enjoyed every second of it. I had to put down my phone, stare at the TV the whole time, it was worth the watch. But the Giants made it pretty clear they were looking for a quarterback last year. They didn't get theirs. They offered a first round pick on top of number 6 to go up with New England. That got declined. And then now they're in a spot where they can take a quarterback. And if Dable and was it Shane stick around, they're going to have to make a move for a quarterback. And it's not like Daniel Jones is there anymore. So to me here, they could have a conversation about a Jalen Milroe or a Drew Aller as well. Aller would probably be more appealing of the two, just because I think he's had the most steady upward trajectory this season. Milroe's kind of been all over the place, and then you kind of look at the way Aller's built. It might be something where, for Brian Dable, you think a little bit back to Josh Allen in the way he plays. And I'll be clear about this. We're talking about how he was coming out of college. We're not talking about the level that Josh Allen's playing at right now in the league, because if we were, Drew Aller would be gone at number 1. What I think here, there's maybe a little bit of debate, but ultimately, I would probably say unless Drew Aller does something incredible in the playoffs, Cam Ward's the quarterback, and this really shouldn't impact too much for Jacksonville. But I think those are the first 2 picks, pretty comfortably. At number 3, as much as the Patriots can argue they need offensive line and other positions, and this is kind of the same conversation that Jacksonville's had, I just think you got to take Travis Hunter. Maybe the Jaguars or the Panthers are sending offers to try to get back up for Travis Hunter. I could see both those teams using him. I think to the Panthers game that I watched earlier today, I had on while I was recording the recap, and I made a comment about, oh, wow, Bryce Young threw it like 50 yards down the field, and they're at the 1-yard line, or they look like they're going to beat the Eagles. Well, Xavier Legette drops the ball, right? You talk about a guy they could bring in that they could use on both sides of the ball who's going to catch everything. It's Travis Hunter. So I could see both teams being interested. I could definitely see other teams being interested as well. But ultimately, I think you're going to have to probably offer them an extra 1 to do it, and I don't know if Jacksonville would do that. I mean, you look back to last year, right? Moving up for Drake May here, this was going from 6 to 3. It was going to cost the Giants more than their future first. There was going to be a larger cost because that was declined by the Patriots. So I'm going to say Jacksonville doesn't do that, especially with a lot of other really great players on the board, although notably not to the same level of Hunter. So we're going to have Travis Hunter go at 3. Now, this is where I think there's a little more debate. So, looking at needs, wipe off quarterback. They're not drafting one. There's no way. Bryce Young's been playing really well recently. He's had those great moments you want to see, and I think at this point you have to ride it out with him, and I think you'd feel a lot more comfortable doing that, and you want to see if you can help him out in some way. So for Carolina, there's a lot of ways you could go with this pick. I don't know their cornerback situation as much. I know J.C. Horn they like. I don't know if he's someone who's a free agent or what exactly. Will Johnson could be on the table. I think McMillan has to be. I think they could use another receiver. I mean, all these players, except for Genti, really, they could be considering. To me, though, I want to make this clear, this pick could go a lot of ways. Like, I don't think this is a clear thing. If it was me, this would be Abdul Carter. I think that would be just a really easy pick to make at this point. I'm not sure that's going to be what I do here. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know what I'm going to do here yet. I'm trying to think this through. For Carolina, man, this could be a spot where you trade back. This really could. This could be where a team comes up. And you consider something else, which I don't have the tweet pulled up, but I know earlier today, because I'm recording this shortly after the game, the Jets had a report come out from Ian Rappaport that they were wanting to take a quarterback in the first round. Now, I think the Jets get higher on this list potentially. I think they could pass both Jacksonville and Tennessee, maybe even Carolina, with how close they're playing their games. But if this was the draft order, you consider that the Jets would probably want a quarterback, the Browns would want one, and the Saints would want one. For Carolina, they kind of make sense as the team where a quarterback they make sense as the team that deals for someone else who wants a quarterback. So I'm going to probably say that takes place here. That's going to be my bet. And regardless of who it is, I don't think it matters too much for Jacksonville because the quarterback goes off the board, right? And who cares at that point? Because now you're up on the clock. So let's say, gosh, who would it be? I'd probably say the New York Jets. I think the Browns, they've already traded a lot of draft picks. It's gone poor for them. They have picks back now. I don't think they'd want to do it. The Saints, they got a lot of rebuilding to do. I don't think that's something they would go all in on. So I would probably go with the New York Jets here. What that would look like, it could be a future first, and this won't matter as much. So let's just say it's like 2 seconds. You can disagree with it, but it won't really matter for this. There has been a lot of talk about this being Drew Aller if the Jets move up to 4. I know I saw some stuff with was it Aller on Instagram where Fashanu, the left tackle, I don't know if he's playing left tackle right now for the Jets, but he was a left tackle for Penn State. He's in New York now with the Jets. He was saying stuff to Aller about how he performed, and Aller responded with like the Jets chant. So I think you could see some interest there, and I hope they would develop him right. I hope they would sit him, but I think Drew Aller would be their guy. And with Milroe, who really knows at this point? I can't even confidently say that he declares for the draft, especially with Alabama missing the playoffs. That could really change things there. He could just possibly not even be in this draft. So we're going to say Drew Aller goes off. Now, for Jackson, there were 2 ways this was going to go down. One was you're going to be up, and a quarterback is going to be there that someone wants. You're going to get calls, and you're going to see if you can get something good for him, and maybe you move back and just try to take the best player that falls to you. The other scenario, which is what played out, is that someone above you traded out, which you have at 4 for Carolina, and maybe this is where you're considering just staying put and taking someone, because you look at what's available. Milroe's your top quarterback. At least he's mine. There will be some who disagree. That's all right. But there's not really a quarterback someone's moving up for, I would guess. So at this point, you kind of got to pick here. And this would be something where, look, I'll be honest. What I would do here, not many people will agree with, and that's okay. So I'll give you what I would do, and I'll give you what I think the Jaguars would do. And then we'll take a look at maybe some of the teams you would have traded back with and what it might cost to do that if they were moving up for a quarterback here. If it was me, this would be Abdul Carter. I know we have Josh Allen. I know we have Trayvon Walker. We have nothing behind him. You can rotate edges. And Abdul Carter is someone who is so gifted that if you were really worried about how often these guys are all on the field, boom the linebacker a little bit. He can still play. But Abdul Carter is just having a phenomenal season. And I'm firmly in the camp that, look, if you have an elite pass rusher available here, gosh, make the move. Like, I mean, you look at Jared Verse this last year, he's going to be defensive player, realistically. He was there for Jackson. And look, we're really happy with Brian Thomas Jr. That's a phenomenal pick, but that was an incredible value that Jacksonville had available. They ultimately passed on it, and it worked out. You're still in a good situation. Plus, you got a couple more draft picks. But man, I mean, Jared Verse has had a hell of a year. And I think the way that Abdul Carter plays, I mean, he is like a Michael Parsons clone. That is just what he is. The athleticism that he brings and the speed threat that he is and the size that he plays at is phenomenal. So he would be my selection. Now, realistically, what actually happens? Really easy here. I don't think you're taking Tetterell McMillan this high if you're Jacksonville specifically. I think with Travis Hunter, what really makes it different is that he can play both sides of the ball and he's a generational type of player. So that's why you don't really worry as much because wide receiver really isn't the top need for this team. I think Mason Graham, he's a phenomenal player, but he's not someone who makes sense for Jacksonville as much because you've already invested in so many defensive linemen. And you kind of need those guys to work out. Will Johnson makes sense because it's a need. You can move on from Ronald Darby. You have Tyson Campbell getting hurt almost every game. You need something there. The other player that we could just throw out, although it's a little rich, Ashton Genty. I've mentioned him, I think, once or twice now on the channel. I can't remember, but it's been something I've talked more about this week on Twitter. I wouldn't take him here with what you have available, but if you were moving back and he fell, I would really consider it. And I get the immediate argument people go to is that, well, we can't support that, or it's that you can't take running back that early. Well, it depends on the kind of running back you take. If you are not taking someone who is truly special and is a game changer in the NFL, and not just, oh, he's a good running back, right? That's not enough for a first round pick. If you're getting a guy who's a true game changer and you can build up the supporting infrastructure around them, that can be a great pick. However, Jacksonville's got to be able to do that. I think that, without knowing who will be in charge this next year, maybe you get someone in who can do it. And it really will come down to, getting a new right guard, trying to upgrade its center. Like, those are doable things, right? And we can't look at this in the perspective of let's only talk about everything as if you have one pick, right? Like, you say, oh, we can't take this player because we have a need here. Well, first of all, drafting BPA is way better than just drafting for needs. Second of all, we'll see how many picks you have. 9. You've got tons of money to spend in free agency. At least just the way the cap is. So, no, you don't have an excuse to say, we can't fix this problem. But with that all said, I wouldn't take Genty here. You have better players on the board in Carter and Johnson who are bigger needs for this team and more valuable. So that would be where I would go. But like I said, it would be Carter for me. For the team, it would be Johnson. Now, let's say the Jets didn't trade up here. Say Carolina stayed at number 4. It doesn't really matter who they took, but let's just say it's Abdul Carter. Maybe you're looking to trade out of 5. If you are, we'll pull up the chart here, take a look at. So your value at number 5, 1,700, and going down to say 7 with the Jets is 1,500. Now there's a quarterback tax to consider in this, right? And so you consider, like, just this last year, you had the Giants trying to move up from 6 to 3. It's a difference of 600 points. They offered a first, and they were declined. So my point in saying that is that you're not just asking for 200 points worth of picks here, right? It's not going to be like number 78. If a team wants to move up from, say, 7 to 5, so we'll just pretend this is the Jets, I think it's probably 39, I would imagine, and maybe something else in the future. I don't think it would be too much more past that, just because you keep in mind, like, Our conversations with 1 to 2 were a second and a future second. So you're probably at least getting 39. I just don't think it's much past that. Maybe they flip you 138, but you got other teams that are dealing. Say it's the Browns wanting to come up. That might look something like 8, 40, and 93 to spitball it. The other team you consider here would be the Saints in number 10 if they want to move up. That would be 1042 for sure. And then this is maybe where you get that future second, right? Or maybe you ask them for a first in the future straight up, which I don't think they could agree to just because their team's probably not going to be that great next year. But the further you trade back, the more you're going to get in the deal. So that's kind of what you're looking at if you decide to trade back. Now, say we do. I would think, can't really do it because we took Howard there. I think you could get Genty at number 10. It's possible he could go to the Browns. Carter would have been gone. Graham would be gone. McMillan would be gone. Johnson would be gone. So that's kind of your issue. Because if you trade too far back, maybe you're not getting the player you want. Now, you could also have your eyes on someone. Say you really like Benjamin Morrison. I think he's a really good player. He's a good man coverage corner. Fits what the Jaguars want on defense, although there will be a different defensive coordinator realistically next year. But maybe you decide, hey, this is a player I'd love to get. Why don't I trade back and get draft capital? That's possible too. But it is also a hard draft class to trade back in and get a good amount for, past like 10. Because as you see, this is where the draft class falls off pretty quick. Like, look at my board. I've got 4 S tier grades. I have 4 first round grades, early first round grades. And then I have, 6 guys that are middle first round grades. So 14 players that I think are worth more than the end of the first round. And there's not going to be that many on everyone's board, too. It might be less for some teams. So, with that said, there might not be the players people want to trade up for as much later in the draft. So, that's kind of something you got to consider, too. But we'll leave it off here. I think if this is your situation, you're probably just staying put. You don't have the quarterback that's there that anyone's going to trade with you for. It would be Will Johnson. So we'll take him here. If you're trading back, I think realistically, you're probably looking at 7 with the Jets. You're wanting to drive up the price with other competitors, with the Browns and the Saints, for example. You know they're taking a quarterback. Say Abdul Carter's gone here. I don't know if the Titans would take Will Johnson. It doesn't seem too realistic with their cornerback room. I think this would be a receiver, more likely. Maybe a Tetaroa McMillan. So, at number 7, if you're doing that trade, maybe you're still getting Will Johnson. But I think realistic, Will Johnson's probably the player you're watching. You go further back, maybe it's Ashton Genty, depending on the coach you get, right? Maybe you get a Ben Johnson or a Liam Cohen that says, give me my running back. And maybe they don't love the backfield. That'd be a fair thing to say at this point, because it's not like the rushing attack's been that great. But of course, it goes beyond just the backfield not being the strongest in the league. It goes to the offensive line as well. So, who knows? But that's kind of what I got here. So, we'll call it good there. But I hope that gives you guys some thoughts on just how things could shake out in the first round, how this changes things. It really transforms the draft for Jacksonville, and unfortunately in a bad way. But, that gives you your introduction to it. So with that said, I want to shout out our channel members, Premier Nasir 904, Mr. Dolphin, Scrubber Ducky 500, and Brian Foster. I appreciate your support. You guys all let me know in the comments, what would you do in this situation? How's your draft strategy change? Are you someone who's sitting here saying we got to trade back up for Hunter? We have to get him at all costs. Are you someone that says stick and pick, take the best player? Needs don't matter. Are you someone who wants to move back and try to get a bunch of picks for the future? Do you have players you're looking at? I think that's all interesting. So would love to hear your thoughts on that. But that's all I've got today. So appreciate y'all watching. We'll see you in the next one. And finally, go Jags.